Hi again then guys, and welcome to the 60th episode now of Days Gone By, the review series of course for the classic cars of the world of Gran Turismo and some vintage cars in there as well. And this is another specialised vehicle from Gran Turismo's past, on Gran Turismo 4 specifically. Another vehicle like the Model T and the Patent Motor Wagon and the Daimler Motor Carriage that is only featured on Gran Turismo 4 and has never been featured since. And in the case of some of these cars, that's a real shame. And although some people may not agree, I would personally strongly say that this is another case of a car which I would personally love to see back, but also which has great collector's appeal. It's not a vintage car, it's a classic from 1963, and the vehicle in question is a Daihatsu. Now, anyone who's been around on the channel for a while will probably know that I really like the Daihatsu brand. I love their performance cars, such as the Storia Cross 4, the Move SRXX, and the Core Avanzato. This one is not, though, a performance car. It's just a small runabout, basically a delivery vehicle, if you want it to be, a tiny three-wheel pickup. It's one of the only three-wheeled vehicles to ever be featured on Gran Turismo, and although the specs aren't remarkable, it's only putting out 37 horsepower and 46 pound-feet of torque in fully tuned form from a 305cc single-cylinder turbo engine. But what it does with those numbers is actually pretty impressive. The top speed is not bad at all for its power, and the horsepower per tonne, well, it's not going to be remarkable, but 89 horsepower per tonne isn't bad for a car with that kind of power. Now, obviously it doesn't have a PP point level or a car class like we have now on Gran Turismo, but back then it was a vehicle which was an unlockable car. You couldn't purchase the vehicle, you won it for a Daihatsu race event, and if you do own Gran Turismo 4 and you haven't won the car, I'd recommend doing so. It's not a vehicle which everyone should get, necessarily, but if you are a classic car fan, and if you clicked on this episode, chances are you probably are, then it is a great collector's piece to have. Now, it's available in only a couple of colours, and the performance isn't off the scale. Obviously, it's quick for its power, as I said, and the fact that it only weighs 415 kilos helps it to maintain that kind of speed through corners. Funnily enough, in a very similar way to the actual performance Daihatsus, such as their K-cars. When you have such a small, lightweight, tiny vehicle, especially a three-wheeler with one single wheel for steering at the front, you can have incredible manoeuvrability, which makes it perfect for twisty, tight tracks. If the Gran Turismo Arena, which we have on GT6, were on GT4, this would have been a great car for that track. In fact, I have no doubt you'd be able to take virtually every corner on that track almost at full throttle, if not at full throttle. And even on Gran Turismo 4, where it's not a car which you'd race that often, you can if you want to. It may not necessarily win all races that you enter with it, but for its spec, it's a very punchy little vehicle. It doesn't necessarily have the recognition among the community that something like a Model T does, certainly not the recognition that the Patent Motor Wagon and the Daimler Motor Carriage have, but nonetheless it is a very interesting, quirky classic, which Gran Turismo, as I said, doesn't have anymore. It's a shame that we don't have cars like this. Gran Turismo 4 had some great, unique vehicles, and this, I would say, is one of them. Were it still on Gran Turismo now, it still wouldn't necessarily be the most usable of cars, and it doesn't really have many natural rivals. In fact, the only direct rival which comes to mind would probably be the newer version of the same car, the newer Daihatsu Midget, which is a very similar vehicle, basically just a four-wheeled version. You're looking at similar kind of performance in stock form, but that car obviously can be tuned much, much higher than this one can in comparison. Now, if this car could be tuned higher, it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing, because once you get up to certain speeds in a three-wheeled vehicle such as this or a Reliant Robin, you could quite easily flip the car over. Now on Gran Turismo 4, I'm not sure if you could really get it to that point because the physics didn't really allow that, but on GT6 you definitely could, because you can roll over vehicles which you'd think are pretty stable just by going over a curb. So this car would be flipping over all the time, which could be great for the fun factor, but not necessarily conducive to racing. Now, as far as whether or not this car could be brought back, I think there's a relatively shallow chance of that happening now. were they to continue having DLC on mainstream Gran Turismo games like 5 and 6, I would have said that there is a slight chance of having the car back as a DLC vehicle. But even then, that would be a very, very slim chance, and of course it's not going to happen now. On GT Sport, there's virtually a non-existent chance, because not only do we not really have cars of this performance level, but we don't have any classics on the game so far at all. So, as far as Gran Turismo's future goes, I'd say it's very slim at best as to whether this car could return. So if you are looking to drive a car like this, and some of the other classics which we've already discussed and that we're still going to cover in this series as well from GT4, then I'd definitely recommend playing that game. If you haven't already, maybe you're newer to the Gran Turismo franchise, maybe you started on 5 or 6, it is, I would say, and I know many of you guys would say as well who have and do play Gran Turismo 4, that it's definitely worth picking up a copy of that game and playing it, especially if you've got the slightly older PS3, for instance, and I think you can get it from the PSN store, although I'm not sure on that, or you could just get a PS2, they're not expensive. But either way, it's definitely worth checking out the game for vehicles like this and others too. So overall, that's it for this particular review. Kind of over-specialised, like the Model T and the Patent Motor Wagon, with less relevance now than it had then, but still, it's interesting to look over the quirky cars of Gran Turismo's past. But that's it for this episode overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.